Hi, Peter Charles here, Focus for Life Fly Fishing. And I thought I'd start another little series. This on the type of fly lines that I really enjoy fishing. It's more oriented towards the actual fishing capabilities of the line, why it is I happen to like fishing them. I'm staying away from kind of like the technological side of it. There's plenty of information on the Airflow's website about all these lines. So I'm going into more of the fishing capabilities. The other thing I should say, I am Airflow Pro Staff, but long before I became Airflow Pro Staff, I was a big user of Airflow lines. I particularly like them because they were made out of polyurethane rather than polyvinyl chloride. And that difference was a big one for me. They're very durable, and I've had no problems with cracking, and some of my lines are like 14 years old, and I'm still fishing them today. Where is it? Yeah, lines like these, the old Airflow cold water 40 plus. There's some that date back to the mid noughties, and they're still on reels and they're still used when I go to Cape Cod. So the durability was one thing. The tapers were very good, especially the Delta taper. That was really my first introduction to Airflow, and I've been a fan of that taper ever since, both in single-handed and two-hand, overhead, and spay. Taper just works for me. So I'm going to get into it. I'm going to start today with the Airflo Xceed trout line, and I've done a lot of fishing with the Xceed. It is probably the trout line I've used the most over the years. Though there's an 8-weight here and it's still labeled trout, I use it also for smallmouth bass, and I also use it for carp. In fact, it's become my favorite carp line, primarily because it handles the types of weighted crayfish that I normally use for fishing for carp. Enables me to turn them over very accurately at relatively close ranges. Carp is often thought of as a fish that you work at distance, but I found fishing techniques where I can get quite close to them, but that means I have to be able to have a line that loads well and turns over well at relatively short ranges. It also has to be able to spay cast reasonably well or roll cast reasonably well at close ranges, because a lot of the time I don't really overhead. I'm just doing a quick single spay just to change direction. When I see a carp from over there and I move to a carp over there, I want to be able to make that quick direction change. The last thing I want to do is be overheading over there, constantly working a line over their heads. That's not a good. They're the smartest fish in the water, and when it comes to freshwater fish, and I really don't want to be making too much of a fuss when I'm out there fishing for them. So it's about having a reasonably good finesse presentation and still maintain that turnover power. When it comes to smallmouth bass fishing with the Xceeds, I'm looking for something different. I'm covering water, so I want a line that loads up the rod quickly so I can fire a weighted fly at a long distance, or I'm working very close range. I mean, a lot of my smallmouth bass fishing is done at relatively close ranges, and it's more of a dead drift upstream type presentation, where I'm making a little short cast upstream, dead drifting a fly downstream, swinging it out, repeat. And there's a lot of this bang, 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 and you want that quick loading line that's going to do the job for you. Now, the Xceeds are slightly overweight, according to the AFTMA scale, which gives them that quick loading capability. Their front taper is around 7 feet long, which is a nice compromise between turnover and finesse. So when you've got a 7-foot taper combined with a slightly overweight belly, you're going to get two things, basically. You're going to get reasonable turnover because of the extra weight, but being 7 foot long, you can, if you back off, you can let it just drift in there and turn over. I do use them for trout on occasion, but I'm more likely to go out with an elite line, or if I'm fishing streamers and wet flies, I'll probably be out with an intermediate. If I'm nymphing, I'll probably be using a taper that's more suitable for that. But if I'm going for dries, I'll probably be working with an elite. But I find that the Xceed is a good trout line when it's windy. Um, because let's face it, when it's windy, presenting dry flies is a pain. We all been there, trying to be accurate when the wind is blowing things all over the place. So you need a little bit more turnover. You need a little bit more power, and especially considering that fishing at dry fly distances is typically often around about 20 feet. You don't have a lot of fly line out when you're trying to make a cast. So you want it to load up fast. So I've either used the Xceed, or if you've seen my other video, I've often put a 5-weight presentation on my 4-weight rod to do the same thing. But both the Xceed and moving up to a 5-weight does the job. But nevertheless, I find that the Xceed does a lot of different things for me, simply because it's a little overweight, but it still has a nice front taper that allows a reasonable presentation. Because when I'm fishing for carp, I really don't want that fly getting smacked into the water, even though it's a weighted crayfish. I still want to be able to just drop it in there with a little plop and give a reasonably decent finesse presentation. So if you're looking for sort of a general purpose, sort of do everything, if you want to toss a nymph rig, toss a streamer, a dry, a wet fly, something with some weight, the Xceed is going to be a good general purpose line. So if I only could afford one line, and I was going to, do trout and smallmouth with my 5-weight, the Xceed would be the way to go. I mean, it covers so many bases well that you can put a 5-weight Xceed on your 5-weight trout rod and cover smallmouth, cover trout, and be able to cover a broad spectrum of fishing situations. So give it a try. Cheers.